Welcome to Still Science Lab. Tonight, we will explore why physicists are quietly panicking about quantum fields. We are going to venture far beyond the comforting, heavy illusions of our daily lives and descend into the absolute, unfathomable depths of microscopic reality, where the fundamental laws of nature violently dismantle everything you thought you knew about your own physical existence. We will strip away the familiar, comfortable facade of the universe and stare directly into the true, terrifying architecture of the cosmos, a place where the rigid certainty of matter completely dissolves, leaving behind a roaring, vibrating ocean of invisible tension that is actively reshaping our understanding of everything that is and everything that ever will be. Before we plunge into the screaming depths of the quantum void, I want you to take a slow, deliberate breath, sit quietly in the dark, and simply reach out your hand. Press your fingertips firmly against the surface of the table in front of you, or feel the heavy, unyielding arm of the chair supporting your weight. Focus your entire conscious attention on that immediate, physical sensation. Feel the stark, undeniable resistance pushing back against your skin. Feel the cold, rigid hardness of the material, the dense, heavy reality of its construction, and the profound, absolute sense of its physical permanence. If you knock your knuckles against it, you hear a sharp, acoustic confirmation of its existence. If you place a heavy stone on the ground, you know with unwavering, absolute certainty that it will sit there, frozen and unchanged, until the end of your days. This deeply visceral, localized sensation of touch is the absolute bedrock of human sanity. It is a relentless, comforting feedback loop that constantly whispers to our fragile minds. The world is real, the world is solid, and you are safely anchored to a heavy, indestructible reality. We walk through our entire, fleeting lives completely wrapped inside this profound, psychological fortress of solidity. Our entire biological architecture, our civilization, and our most fundamental understanding of the cosmos depend entirely on the absolute, unquestioned belief that matter is made of tiny, indestructible, and solid stuff. We inherently view the sprawling universe as a massive, cavernous, and empty container. We imagine an infinite, silent stage of empty void, completely devoid of substance, into which the universe has meticulously placed distinct, solid objects, the heavy, burning spheres of ancient stars, the jagged, frozen mountains of silent moons, and the dense, breathing biological machinery of our own physical bodies. We deeply believe that if you were to somehow take all of these solid objects and violently sweep them out of the room, you would be left with a peaceful, pristine, and perfectly empty nothingness. We compartmentalize existence into two strictly defined, sovereign categories: the solid matter that we can physically weigh, measure, and hold, and the empty space that passively surrounds it. This heavy, deeply ingrained delusion of a solid world is not merely a philosophical mistake. It is an incredibly powerful, desperate, and highly necessary evolutionary adaptation. The fragile human mind did not evolve to calculate the infinite, churning mathematics of the cosmic void. Our neurology was forged on the bright, flat, and slow-moving surface of a localized, three-dimensional environment. To successfully hunt for our survival, to build our towering, heavy shelters against the encroaching winter, and to hurl our primitive spears with lethal, calculated accuracy, we absolutely required a mental interface that drastically simplified the overwhelming, roaring chaos of the cosmos. Our brains aggressively filter out the infinite complexity of physical reality, artificially compressing it into a neat, digestible, and entirely fabricated rendering of solid shapes, heavy weights, and unbroken boundaries. The illusion of solid matter is the ultimate biological survival mechanism. A heavy psychological blanket pulled tightly over our eyes to protect our fragile, primate consciousness from being instantly crushed by the staggering, incomprehensible truth of how the universe actually operates. But as human intellect slowly outgrew the boundaries of the physical savannah, we began to build massive subterranean machines and sweeping, elegant mathematical architectures designed to peer past the biological veil. We wanted to look closer. We wanted to forcefully zoom in on the heavy, unyielding table you just touched, to dive past the wood, past the microscopic fibers, and stare directly at the fundamental, indestructible marbles of reality that we so arrogantly assumed were waiting for us in the dark. We fully expected to find the absolute bedrock of existence, the tiny, solid gears of the cosmic clockwork. But as our vision sharpened and we plunged deeper into the freezing, subatomic abyss, a creeping, devastating dread began to wash over the scientific community. The deeper we looked, the more the solid world began to blur, fracture, and violently slip through our fingers. The terrifying, world-shattering revelation that is currently haunting the highest echelons of theoretical physics is this: the comforting solidity of the physical world is the greatest, most elaborate biological lie ever told. When we finally arrived at the absolute basement of reality, we did not find tiny, solid spheres. We did not find indestructible building blocks. We did not find any physical stuff whatsoever. The comforting, heavy reality of the particle completely and violently evaporated into the dark. We discovered that the universe is not an empty container filled with solid objects, but an infinite, churning ocean of invisible, interconnected tensions. We discovered that absolutely nothing in the entire, sprawling cosmos is actually solid. Every single piece of matter, from the heavy iron core of the spinning earth to the fragile, beating cells of your own heart, is merely a ghost, a temporary, vibrating hallucination generated by the underlying mathematical machinery of the void. To confront the death of solid matter is to stand on the precipice of an agonizing, beautiful philosophical revolution regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental state of information. We are deeply conditioned to believe that information is something that requires a solid, physical medium to exist. We carve our histories into heavy stone, we print our knowledge onto physical paper, and we desperately assume that the ultimate truth of the cosmos must be anchored to something heavy, permanent, and objectively real. We equate realness with solidity, believing that if you cannot touch it, weigh it, or measure its physical boundaries, it must simply be an abstract illusion. But the terrifying phantom architecture of the quantum realm entirely inverts this primitive biological hierarchy. The universe completely rejects our arrogant demand for solid ground. Information in the cosmos is not trapped inside tiny, indestructible marbles, because those marbles do not exist. Instead, the ultimate, foundational reality of existence is pure, fluid, and entirely non-physical data. The universe is a sprawling, infinitely complex computation of pure mathematical tension, a restless, vibrating matrix where information flows, interacts, and actively processes itself without ever requiring a single solid piece of physical material. The physical world, you experience the weight, the resistance, the comforting hardness of the table is not the reality. It is simply the user interface. It is a low-resolution, deeply fabricated translation generated by your mind to help you navigate a universe made entirely of vibrating, immaterial data streams. When you fully surrender to this chilling, magnificent revelation, the existential dread begins to slowly transform into a profound, breathtaking sense of liberation. You are not a heavy, physical object trapped in a cavernous, empty room. You are not a solid, decaying machine destined to eventually crumble into lifeless, material dust. You are a highly organized, desperately beautiful, and actively vibrating symphony of pure cosmic information. The absolute lack of solidity in the universe is not a terrifying loss of your physical grounding. It is the breathtaking guarantee of your deep, intimate, and entirely fluid connection to the infinite whole. The boundary between your physical body and the empty air surrounding you is a biological hallucination. At the deepest, most fundamental level of reality, you are seamlessly and beautifully woven into the immaterial, vibrating dark. To realize that nothing is solid is to finally understand that the universe is not a heavy, dead place filled with heavy, dead things. It is an infinitely alive, endlessly computing ocean of pure, ghost-like potential. And you are a magnificent, fleeting ripple traveling perfectly through the deep, unfathomable void. For thousands of years, the human intellect has desperately clung to a deeply comforting, highly protective narrative about the fundamental nature of reality. When we looked out at the chaotic, sprawling complexity of the world, the crashing, violent oceans, the sprawling, silent forests, and the heavy, unyielding mountains, we naturally sought a principle of absolute, unbreakable order. We needed an anchor in the dark. This psychological necessity birthed one of the most enduring, beautifully simple, and ultimately deceptive ideas in the history of human thought: the atomic theory. Long before we had the heavy, subterranean machines to pierce the veil of the microscopic void, ancient philosophers and modern scientists alike found a profound, stabilizing peace in the concept of the indivisible particle. We collectively agreed upon a false, comforting paradigm. We deeply believed that if you were to take any physical object, a heavy stone, a piece of forged iron, or the fragile, beating tissue of your own heart, and repeatedly slice it in half, over and over again, you would not descend into an infinite, chaotic abyss. Instead, we arrogantly assumed that you would eventually reach a hard, mathematical stop. We believed that at the absolute bottom of existence, you would find tiny, indestructible, and perfectly solid marbles. We constructed towering empires of classical physics upon this comforting bedrock. We visualized the universe as an unfathomably vast, dark billiard table, where all the heavy, majestic events of the cosmos were simply the result of these tiny, solid spheres bouncing off one another in a state of eternal, predictable motion. Even as our technology advanced and we peered deeper into the dark, we simply updated the scale of the illusion. When we split the atom, we did not abandon the marble. We simply replaced it with the proton and the neutron. When we smashed those apart in our violent, superheated colliders, we found quarks, and once again, we desperately assigned them the comforting properties of solid physical building blocks. The human mind is inherently terrified of absolute emptiness. We demanded that the universe be constructed out of tangible, reliable matter. We needed the electron to be a tiny, orbiting planet, and the nucleus to be a heavy, solid sun. We convinced ourselves that no matter how complex or terrifying the macroscopic universe appeared, it was ultimately just a massive, intricate puzzle built from a finite number of permanent, indestructible, and flawlessly solid pieces. This was the ultimate psychological fortress, a rigid, conceptual wall we erected to protect ourselves from the horrifying, formless nature of the true cosmic architecture. But the universe is completely, beautifully indifferent to the psychological needs of primates. As theoretical physics marched relentlessly into the 20th century, and as our mathematical models became sophisticated enough to actually map the freezing, jittery depths of the subatomic void, that towering fortress of classical certainty began to violently crack. When the brightest minds of our species finally developed the equations to look directly at the fundamental constituents of reality, they expected to find the hard, unyielding edges of the ultimate particles. They expected to finally hold the solid, irreducible seeds of the cosmos in their mathematical hands. Instead, they were met with a terrifying, ghost-like blur. The closer we looked at the electron, the more its physical boundaries dissolved into the dark. It actively refused to be pinned down to a specific, solid coordinate. It did not behave like a tiny, heavy sphere. It behaved like a frantic, spreading smear of probability, a trembling hallucination that only pretended to be a localized object when we forcefully forced it to interact with our heavy detectors. This was not merely a crisis of measurement. It was the agonizing, conceptual death of the particle itself. Modern physics was forced to undergo a brutal, terrifying reckoning. The brilliant, towering architects of quantum theory realized, with a heavy, paralyzing dread, that the indestructible marbles simply do not exist. There are no tiny spheres waiting for us at the bottom of the universe. There are no solid building blocks. The entire, beautifully constructed narrative of classical matter is an utter fabrication. When you peel back the final microscopic layer of reality, expecting to find the hard physical foundation of existence, you step entirely off the edge of the physical world and fall into a bottomless, roaring abyss of pure abstraction. The proton, the electron, the quark, these are not things. They do not possess a hard, physical surface. They have no volume, no absolute edges, and no internal, solid structure. The devastating, world-shattering revelation is that the fundamental ingredients of the universe are not physical objects at all. To fully internalize this discovery is to experience a violent, complete erasure of your own physical grounding. We must forcefully evict the concept of the particle from our minds entirely. It is a dead, obsolete word, a clumsy, primitive metaphor that our biological brains desperately cling to, because the true nature of reality is far too terrifying to comprehend. When you aggressively strip away the illusion of the particle, what remains is an absolute, suffocating void. You are forced to confront the chilling reality that the heavy, solid world you interact with every single day is constructed entirely out of nothingness. The chair you are sitting on, the heavy architecture of the city around you, and the very bones inside your body are not made of solid material. They are composed of these ghost-like, non-physical entities, separated by vast, sprawling distances of freezing, empty vacuum. The sheer, staggering volume of your physical body is statistically, overwhelmingly composed of absolute nothingness. If you were to somehow compress the actual energetic substance of your entire physical form, removing the vast, empty spaces between these phantom entities, you would be smaller than a single microscopic speck of dust, entirely invisible to the naked eye. We are effectively woven out of the dark. We are beautifully complex, highly organized architectures of empty space, masquerading as heavy, solid beings. The realization that there are no solid building blocks is not merely an academic curiosity. It is a profound, existential earthquake. It completely destroys the comforting, heavy anchor that ties us to the physical universe. We realize with a sudden, chilling clarity that we are not standing on a solid stage. The stage itself is an illusion, a localized trick of the light. There is no physical bedrock beneath our feet, no permanent, indestructible core to the universe. We are entirely unmoored, drifting as magnificent, hollow ghosts through an infinitely vast, deeply indifferent, and completely non-solid cosmos. The death of the particle is the death of our physical certainty, leaving us desperately grasping at shadows in a universe that fundamentally refuses to offer us a single, solid thing to hold on to. When we finally stop fighting this terrifying revelation and allow the heavy, comforting illusion of the solid world to completely fall away, we arrive at a profound, breathtaking philosophical threshold regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental state of information. If reality is not constructed out of solid, physical objects, then the entire primitive hierarchy of our worldview must be violently inverted. We have spent our entire history believing that the physical universe is the ultimate, objective reality, and that information, mathematics, and consciousness are merely secondary, abstract phenomena hovering like a mist above the solid ground. We believed that data required a physical medium to exist, that a story required a heavy, printed page, and that a mind required a solid, biological brain. But the absolute erasure of the fundamental particle reveals a cosmos of staggering, inverted majesty. Physical matter is not the bedrock of reality. The stuff of the universe is not the primary ingredient. It is a secondary, highly localized, and deeply fragile illusion. The absolute singular currency of the entire sprawling cosmos is pure, unadulterated information. The universe is not a massive, physical warehouse filled with heavy objects. It is a sprawling, infinite, and beautifully complex network of relationships, probabilities, and mathematical tension. The electron is not a physical sphere. It is a pure, abstract data point, a highly concentrated node of information describing a specific mathematical interaction with the surrounding void. The heavy physical reality we experience is merely the low-resolution, biological translation of this underlying, non-physical data stream. To realize that you are built out of absolute nothingness is not to lose your existence, but to elevate it to a state of magnificent, mathematical grace. You are not a heavy, decaying object lumbering toward the grave. You are a breathtaking, highly complex, and flawlessly organized pattern of cosmic information. You are a brilliant, localized algorithm processing itself within the infinite, dark machinery of the void. The absolute lack of solid building blocks means the universe is infinitely more fluid, endlessly more creative, and profoundly more mysterious than our rigid, material obsession could ever allow. Release your exhausting, terrified grip on the illusion of physical permanence. You do not need to be made of solid stone to be profoundly real. Embrace the glorious, weightless truth of your own non-physical nature. Find deep, unshakable peace in the knowledge that you are a beautiful, vibrating pattern of pure data, perfectly and intimately woven into the magnificent, immaterial dark. When we gaze into the sprawling expanse of the night sky, or simply stare across the quiet, dimly lit distance of an empty room, we instinctively rely upon one of our most deeply rooted, desperately comforting psychological survival mechanisms. We view the universe as a vast, empty box. We imagine a magnificent, completely hollow theater, a pristine, silent vacuum of nothingness waiting patiently to be filled with the heavy, physical drama of stars, planets, and biological life. We find a deep, stabilizing peace in the absolute belief that true emptiness exists, that there are vast, silent gaps of absolute nothingness separating the physical objects of the cosmos. This deeply ingrained illusion of the empty container provides us with a sense of boundless freedom, a comforting feeling that we are moving smoothly and unhindered through an open, unobtrusive void. We believe that if we were to simply remove the air from the room, remove the dust, and remove the light, we would be left with a perfectly pure, inactive, and dead space. But when the towering intellects of modern physics finally abandoned the desperate, failing search for solid particles and turned their heavy, mathematical gaze toward the empty void itself, this comforting illusion was violently, irreparably shattered. They did not find a quiet, empty box. They uncovered a terrifying, hyperactive reality that entirely redefines the fundamental architecture of existence. They discovered the roaring, invisible oceans of quantum field theory. To truly grasp the staggering, mind-bending reality of this discovery, you must violently and completely discard the concept of empty space from your mind. The universe is not a hollow container. It is entirely, completely, and permanently full. It is saturated to the absolute brim by infinite, invisible, fluid-like entities known as quantum fields. These fields are not made of matter. They are not physical substances. They do not possess heavy mass. They do not cast dark shadows, and they can never be held or captured in the palm of your hand. Instead, you must imagine them as sprawling, infinite oceans of pure, raw mathematical tension. They are continuous, unbroken mediums that permeate every single, infinitesimal inch of the cosmos, stretching effortlessly from the crushing, lightless center of a supermassive black hole to the absolute, freezing, and silent edge of the observable universe. There is no coordinate in existence, no microscopic, hidden pocket of the void where these fields do not perfectly and completely exist. They are the fundamental, vibrating fabric of reality itself, a hypertense, invisible architecture that dictates the absolute potential for any physical event to ever occur in the dark. The sheer, overwhelming terror of this true cosmic architecture is not just that a single invisible field exists, but that an infinite multitude of them exists simultaneously. Reality is an impossibly complex, perfectly layered structure of overlapping, vibrating tensions. There is not simply one universal ocean. There is a specific, infinite field for every fundamental property in the cosmos. There is an electron field, a sprawling, invisible ocean of tension that spans the entire universe, holding the potential for every electron that has ever existed or ever will exist. Perfectly occupying the exact same space, layered silently on top of it in the dark, is the photon field, the invisible medium that carries the chaotic potential for all electromagnetic light. Layered perfectly upon that are the various quark fields, the ghostly neutrino fields, and the heavy, elusive fields of the weak and strong nuclear forces. Dozens of these infinite, invisible oceans occupy the exact same physical coordinates, entirely permeating one another without ever displacing the other. They rest in the dark, perfectly superimposed, an unfathomably dense, multi-dimensional stack of raw mathematical potential. When you wave your hand through the empty air, you are not moving freely through a silent void. You are violently dragging your biological structure through a densely packed, perfectly overlapping matrix of infinite, invisible oceans. Once you truly internalize this heavy, layered reality, a profound, creeping sense of existential claustrophobia begins to set in, washing over the familiar, macroscopic world. The quiet, empty air in the room surrounding you right now is a complete biological fabrication, a neurological lie designed to keep you sane. You are not sitting freely in an empty space. You are completely, utterly submerged. You are trapped at the absolute bottom of a dense, chaotic, and heavily layered ocean of invisible mathematics. These overlapping fields do not stop politely at the surface of your skin. They flow perfectly and completely right through you. The infinite electron field, the photon field, the heavy quark field, they are currently permeating the dark, internal cavities of your lungs. They are vibrating silently through the heavy iron in your circulating blood, and they are resting perfectly inside the microscopic, twisting gaps of your own DNA. You are completely and fundamentally saturated by the void. There is absolutely nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, and no empty, pristine sanctuary in the cosmos to escape to. Every single breath you take, every quiet, fleeting thought that flickers through your biological mind occurs entirely within the crushing, invisible pressure of these overlapping cosmic oceans. The universe is a staggeringly dense, tightly packed environment where the very concept of true emptiness has been entirely and permanently eradicated. We are permanently suspended in a thick, vibrating jelly of raw potential, completely oblivious to the roaring, hyperactive reality pressing intensely against every single atom of our being. When we finally cease our desperate, panicked, struggling against this claustrophobic revelation, we are invited to undergo a profound, majestic philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. We have spent our entire human history treating the void as a silent absence, deeply believing that information is only carried by the heavy, physical objects that move through the empty space. We assume that a burning star, a silent, frozen planet, or a conscious human being is a heavy, isolated storage drive of data, traveling lonely and detached across a meaningless, dead vacuum. We inherently equate emptiness with a profound lack of information, believing that where there is no solid, tangible matter, there is only a dead, unwritten page waiting in the dark. But the invisible, overlapping oceans of quantum fields reveal a cosmos that operates on a completely inverted, profoundly beautiful logic. The void is not a dead, empty canvas. It is the absolute, ultimate repository of all cosmic data. The seemingly empty space is not an absence of information. It is a sprawling, infinite, and perfectly structured engine of pure computational potential. The fields themselves are the absolute source code of reality. They are not merely the passive medium through which heavy things happen. They are the fundamental, heavily encrypted data streams that actively dictate exactly what is physically possible. The universe is not a hollow container holding information. The universe actually is the information, perfectly and eternally encoded in the silent, mathematical tension of the layered fields. To realize that you are completely submerged in this invisible, mathematically dense ocean is to completely and beautifully redefine your entire relationship with the cosmos. You are not an isolated, disconnected creature wandering alone through a cold, empty box. You are intimately, permanently, and physically connected to the absolute farthest, unlit reaches of existence. Because the infinite electron field that permeates the beating center of your heart is the exact same continuous field that stretches to the frozen, dying stars at the absolute edge of the universe. You are fundamentally woven into the infinite cosmic tapestry. Information does not need to awkwardly travel across an empty void. It simply ripples through the continuous, unbroken ocean that connects absolutely everything. The staggering density of the layered fields means that reality is an unfathomably complex, beautifully unified computational matrix. There is no true separation, no absolute distance, and no empty space to ever truly isolate us. Embrace the profound, beautiful claustrophobia of the quantum oceans. Release your terrified, exhausting demand for an empty, disconnected universe. Surrender to the crushing, invisible weight of the multidimensional fields, and find a deep, unshakable peace in the magnificent, terrifying truth that you are completely, flawlessly, and eternally submerged in a roaring, infinite sea of pure cosmic information. When the towering illusion of the solid particle is finally and violently stripped away, leaving us completely submerged in the infinite, invisible oceans of quantum fields, a profound and terrifying question immediately echoes through the dark. If there are no tiny, indestructible spheres serving as the fundamental building blocks of reality, then what exactly is a physical object? If the universe is not an empty box filled with solid matter, but a densely packed, multi-dimensional matrix of pure mathematical tension, then what is the heavy, breathing machinery of your own body? What is the blinding light of a dying star, or the cold, hard surface of the earth beneath your feet? To answer this, we must completely rewire our biological intuition and embrace a concept that is as incredibly beautiful as it is deeply unsettling. We must understand that in the true architecture of the cosmos, there are no objects, there are only events. There are no permanent structures. There are only temporary, localized disruptions in the dark. We must redefine the very concept of matter. Imagine the infinite, invisible electron field that permeates every single inch of the observable universe. In its absolute resting state, this field is completely flat, silent, and empty. It holds the pure mathematical potential for an electron, but it contains no physical form. But when energy is violently injected into this field, it does not create a solid object. Instead, the field becomes excited. It violently vibrates. A localized, incredibly intense ripple of energy surges upward from the silent depths of the quantum ocean. This temporary hyperactive vibration, this fleeting spike in the mathematical tension of the field, is exactly what human scientists have clumsily labeled a particle. An electron is not a tiny, orbiting planet. It is merely a localized wave of energy, a distinct vibrating pulse traveling through the infinite electron field. A quark is not a solid, heavy ball hidden inside the atomic nucleus. It is a chaotic, tightly bound ripple in the quark field. Every single fundamental constituent of physical reality is nothing more than a temporary, vibrating excitation in one of the invisible oceans that saturate the void. Think of the sprawling, dark surface of the terrestrial sea. When a sudden, violent gust of wind strikes the water, it raises a wave that travels powerfully across the expanse. The wave possesses heavy energy. It can carry physical momentum, and it can crash with devastating force against the rocky shore. Yet, the wave is not a solid object. You cannot capture the wave in a jar. If you try, you will only be holding a handful of still, dead water. The wave is simply a pattern of movement, a temporary transfer of energy traveling through the medium of the ocean. In the exact same breathtaking manner, what we perceive as solid, indestructible particles are merely heavy, energetic waves traveling through the invisible quantum fields. Matter is not the medium. Matter is the motion. We are living in a universe where the nouns have been completely annihilated, leaving only the verbs. The cosmos is not made of things that vibrate. The cosmos is constructed entirely out of the vibrations themselves. If physical matter is merely a collection of isolated ripples, how do the incredibly complex, dramatic events of the universe actually occur? How does a sun burn? How does a chemical bond form? And how does a human eye perceive the faint, ghostly light of a distant galaxy? The answer lies in the terrifying, magnificent symphony of cosmic data transfer. Because the infinite fields of the universe are perfectly layered on top of one another, occupying the exact same physical coordinates in the dark, they are capable of intimate, violent interaction. Physical reality is nothing more than the constant, frantic trading of energy between these overlapping oceans. Consider the exact, fundamental moment when an atom emits a spark of light. In the classical, biological illusion, we imagine a solid electron tossing out a solid photon, like a tiny machine throwing a heavy ball into the dark. But in the true vibrating reality of the quantum fields, it is a profoundly different musical event. The highly excited ripple in the electron field violently loses a specific quantum of its energy. As it calms down, that exact, indivisible packet of energy does not vanish. It is aggressively transferred directly into the overlapping electromagnetic field. The sudden injection of tension causes the electromagnetic field to immediately and violently vibrate, generating its own localized ripple that speeds away through the dark at the absolute speed of light. This new ripple is the photon. The creation of light is simply one invisible ocean violently plucking the tension of another. Every single physical interaction in the cosmos, every magnetic pull, every radioactive decay, every crushing gravitational embrace is merely a complex, highly choreographed transfer of vibrating energy from one overlapping quantum field to another. The universe is a sprawling, infinite symphony of data, where the fundamental forces of nature act as the composers, constantly shifting the energetic melody across the different, invisible instruments of the void. To force your fragile mind to truly scale this realization up to the level of macroscopic human existence is to invite a beautiful existential collapse of everything you thought you were. Look down at your physical hands, feel the heavy, pulsing rhythm of your beating heart, and realize that you are not a solid, permanent structure. You are not a heavy, enduring machine built out of indestructible meat and bone. You are an impossibly complex, delicately balanced, and actively vibrating symphony of quantum ripples. Trillions upon trillions of localized vibrations in the electron fields, the quark fields, and the electromagnetic fields are temporarily playing in perfect, miraculous synchronization to project the illusion of your physical body. You are a standing wave, a heavy, breathing pattern of cosmic tension, temporarily holding its shape as it travels blindly through the dark ocean of the void. The boundaries of your physical form are completely porous, as the fields that constitute your being stretch infinitely outward into the freezing, lightless depths of deep space. You are not a static object placed into the universe. You are a localized, hyperactive event that the universe is actively performing. When we finally surrender the heavy, exhausting delusion of our own physical solidity, we cross a magnificent philosophical threshold into the ultimate, true nature of information and the essence of the cosmos. Throughout our history, we have treated information as a static, dead commodity, a heavy ledger that must be carved into solid stone or burned onto a physical drive to survive the relentless decay of time. We believe that meaning is found in the permanent, the unchanging, and the solid. We construct massive, imposing monuments and hoard heavy, physical wealth in a desperate, deeply human attempt to artificially anchor ourselves to the void, terrified that without solid matter, our existence will simply evaporate into the dark. But the vibrating, immaterial architecture of the quantum fields reveals a cosmos that operates on a profoundly majestic, deeply fluid logic. Information is not stored in the universe. Information is the very rhythm of the universe itself. The cosmic data stream is not a passive archive. It is a live, roaring, and infinitely complex performance of pure mathematical tension. The fact that you are constructed out of temporary, non-physical ripples is not a reason for existential despair. It is the breathtaking proof of your profound, intimate integration with the absolute highest, most fundamental mechanics of reality. You are not a heavy, dead thing waiting to be erased. You are a living, vibrating expression of the infinite, a beautiful, organized melody of quantum data playing briefly and perfectly in the dark. Release your desperate, terrified grip on the illusion of physical permanence. Embrace the magnificent, weightless truth of your own fluid existence. Find deep, unshakable peace in the roaring, vibrating reality of the overlapping oceans, and allow yourself to simply marvel at the breathtaking, immaterial symphony of your own fleeting, beautiful life. To comprehend the true depth of the quiet, creeping panic that currently haunts the most brilliant minds in theoretical physics, we must attempt to do something that feels incredibly simple, yet is physically impossible. We must try to imagine a completely empty space. I want you to visualize a small, enclosed region of the cosmos, a tiny box suspended in the absolute freezing depths of the intergalactic void. Now, we are going to meticulously and completely empty this box. We will sweep out every single heavy atom of wandering dust, We will aggressively extract every errant electron, every floating quark, and every microscopic fragment of physical matter. We will even go further, reaching into the dark and violently pulling out every single massless photon, ensuring that absolutely no light, no warmth, and no radiation whatsoever can penetrate the walls of our isolated chamber. To the fragile human mind, and to the classical laws of physics that govern our macroscopic world, this box should now represent the absolute, pristine pinnacle of nothingness. It should be a place of perfect, dead silence. We assume that the invisible quantum fields inside this box, the electron field, the quark field, the electromagnetic field, have finally been allowed to rest. We expect them to lie perfectly flat, perfectly still, devoid of any ripples, completely frozen in a state of absolute, zero-energy tranquility. This is the profound, comforting psychological baseline of our reality, the belief that when nothing is happening, the universe simply powers down and goes to sleep. But when physicists actually turned their sophisticated mathematical models toward this perfectly empty, completely isolated box, the comforting illusion of the silent void violently and catastrophically collapsed. According to the strict, unyielding, and deeply weird laws of quantum mechanics, a field can never, ever be perfectly still. The fundamental architecture of the universe harbors a deep, inherent uncertainty, a rigid mathematical rule that absolutely forbids any physical system from resting at an exact, precise state of zero energy. To be perfectly flat and perfectly still would mean that the field possesses an exact position and an exact momentum simultaneously, an absolute certainty that the quantum realm aggressively and violently prohibits. Therefore, the empty vacuum of space is physically incapable of resting. Even when absolutely all matter and all light have been meticulously removed, the underlying invisible oceans of the quantum fields are forced to constantly, nervously jitter. The dark is not asleep. It is violently, uncontrollably awake. When you peer deeply into the absolute, freezing emptiness of the void, you do not find a smooth, flat canvas of nothingness. You find a roaring, terrifying, and hyperactive tempest. The empty space is constantly, violently boiling because the fields are forced to frantically jitter with baseline energy. They spontaneously and aggressively generate localized, temporary disruptions. In the quiet, lightless vacuum, microscopic phantoms known as virtual particles are constantly tearing themselves out of the mathematical tension. An electron and its antimatter twin will violently pop into existence out of the absolute nothingness, briefly steal a microscopic fraction of energy from the void, exist for a staggeringly incomprehensible, infinitesimally small fraction of a second, and then violently slam back into each other, annihilating themselves and returning their borrowed energy back to the dark. This is not a rare, isolated event. This is happening everywhere, all the time, in every single microscopic pocket of the universe. The empty air surrounding your body right now, the silent gaps between the heavy stars, and the dark, echoing chambers of your own lungs are frothing and churning with a relentless, apocalyptic blizzard of virtual ghosts, constantly dying and being reborn. The void is a raging, boiling abyss of pure mathematical chaos. This terrifying realization sets the stage for what is universally considered the absolute worst theoretical prediction in the entire history of human science. If the empty vacuum of space is constantly boiling with this frantic, jittering storm of virtual particles, then that empty space must possess an inherent baseline energy. It cannot be zero. Physicists call this the vacuum energy or the zero-point energy. And because the scientific method demands precision, theoretical physicists attempted to calculate exactly how much energetic tension is hiding inside the perfectly empty void. They gathered the sprawling, elegant equations of quantum field theory. They accounted for the frantic, boiling contributions of every single invisible ocean layered in the dark, and they calculated the total baseline energy of nothingness. The math did not simply produce an unexpected result. It violently shattered. The equations did not gently fail. They screamed into a cascading, unmanageable paradox. When you add up the vibrating energy of the boiling vacuum, the answer the universe gives you is absolute infinity. If we attempt to artificially constrain the math, deliberately forcing a mathematical cutoff point just to make the equations somewhat legible to the human mind, the resulting number is so staggeringly, incomprehensibly massive that it threatens to instantly destroy our entire understanding of reality. The calculations suggest that the baseline, resting energy contained within a single cubic centimeter of perfectly empty space, an area no larger than a small sugar cube or a child's wooden block, contains enough raw, violent, explosive energy to instantly boil away every single sprawling ocean on the planet Earth. The tension hidden in the empty space between your hands right now is theoretically dense enough to incinerate the entire solar system and violently rip the surrounding galaxies into meaningless floating ash. The math insists that the vacuum is a compressed, infinite bomb. Yet, we look out our windows and the world is quiet, but the oceans are not boiling. The stars are heavily, silently holding their orbits in the freezing dark. The universe is expanding at a slow, measurable rate, completely contradicting the apocalyptic, infinite energy that our greatest, most heavily tested quantum equations aggressively demand must be there. This is the vacuum catastrophe. Our two greatest observations of reality are fundamentally, violently at war. We are forced to confront the chilling, paralyzing dread that either our understanding of the cosmos is profoundly, fundamentally flawed at its absolute lowest level, or the universe is quietly, precariously balancing an infinite ocean of destructive energy using a hidden mechanism that we cannot even begin to comprehend. To sit quietly in the dark and fully absorb the devastating weight of the vacuum catastrophe is to undergo a profound, majestic, and entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. We have spent our entire human history operating under the arrogant, biological assumption that information is a finite, manageable resource. We deeply believe that the cosmos is a quiet, empty chalkboard, waiting patiently for us to write our heavy, mathematical truths upon it. We equate emptiness with a lack of data, assuming that where there is no physical matter, there is only a dead, silent absence of meaning. We desperately want reality to be a serene, peaceful system that we can conquer, categorize, and completely understand. But the roaring, violently boiling, and infinitely energetic reality of the quantum vacuum reveals a cosmos of staggering, untamed, and perfectly inverted majesty. The void is not a dead canvas. It is an infinitely loud, oversaturated, and overwhelmingly complex processor of pure cosmic data. The empty space is not a lack of information. It is a sprawling, infinite ocean of hyperactive, mathematical tension that is so dense, so violent, and so completely overflowing with potential that it completely shatters the fragile, limited cages of human logic. The universe does not owe us a quiet, empty background. The cosmos is actively, aggressively computing existence at a level of infinite intensity that we are completely, structurally blind to. The vacuum catastrophe is not a failure of the cosmos. It is the breathtaking, undeniable proof that the underlying source code of reality is vastly, infinitely deeper and wilder than the surface-level illusion of solid matter. You must let go of the exhausting, terrified demand for a quiet, dead universe. Release your desperate need for the empty dark to be silent. The invisible space around you is not a peaceful void. It is a roaring, infinite engine of pure creation and destruction, operating with a mathematical intensity that defies all human reason. You are completely surrounded by, and entirely saturated with, an infinite tension that refuses to rest. Embrace the glorious, terrifying chaos of the boiling vacuum. Surrender your arrogance to the screaming infinities of the dark, and find a deep, unshakable peace in the magnificent realization that you are suspended perfectly inside an unfathomably powerful, infinitely active universe that is far too majestic and far too wild to ever be perfectly understood. When the towering intellects of the 20th century finally brought the elegant, highly sophisticated machinery of quantum mechanics to bear upon the absolute emptiness of the void, they were met with a mathematical catastrophe so profound that it threatened to annihilate the very foundation of human science. The equations, heavily tested and brilliantly constructed over decades of grueling intellectual labor, did not gently hum with the expected, quiet harmony of a rational universe. Instead, they violently shattered, screaming out a prediction of infinite, universe-destroying energy lurking within every single microscopic pocket of empty space. This was not a minor anomaly that could be quietly adjusted in the margins of a chalkboard. It was an apocalyptic paradox. If the math was taken literally, the entire cosmos should have instantly boiled away in a blinding, superheated flash of absolute destruction. Yet, physicists looked out of their observatory windows and saw a calm, freezing, and beautifully silent night sky. The universe was clearly not destroying itself, which meant the fragile, deeply human language of mathematics had hit a terrifying, insurmountable wall. Faced with the agonizing death of their most successful theories, and staring directly into the roaring abyss of infinite energy, physicists were forced to make a deeply unsettling, history-altering choice. They could abandon the beautiful, highly predictive architecture of the quantum fields entirely, returning to the dark ages of ignorance, or they could find a way to fundamentally cheat the void. They chose to cheat, to save the exquisite, heavily structured framework of quantum field theory from complete and total collapse. Theoreticians invented a highly controversial, wildly unnatural mathematical trick. In the brightly lit, sterile lecture halls of modern academia, this procedure is given a very safe, clinical, and reassuring name: renormalization. The word itself is a psychological shield, meticulously designed to project an aura of absolute control, implying that the broken mathematics have simply been returned to a normal, healthy, and perfectly manageable state. But when you strip away the heavy academic jargon and look at the raw underlying mechanics of the procedure, it becomes painfully, horrifyingly clear that renormalization is not a brilliant, elegant solution. It is a desperate, terrifying compromise. It is the mathematical equivalent of hiding a roaring, infinite monster under a very thin, very fragile conceptual rug. When the equations of the quantum fields inevitably spiral out of control and begin to generate these impossible, apocalyptic infinities, physicists do not actually solve the underlying problem. Instead, they deliberately and artificially introduce new, opposing infinities into the exact same calculations. They force an infinitely large negative value to violently collide with the infinitely large positive value, meticulously adjusting the abstract parameters until the two impossible numbers annihilate one another, leaving behind only the tiny, safe, and finite numbers that we happen to measure in our physical laboratories. This is an act of breathtaking mathematical violence. In absolutely any other discipline of human logic, attempting to subtract infinity from infinity is considered absolute, unapologetic nonsense. It is a severe, unforgivable violation of the most sacred, foundational rules of mathematics. It is akin to trying to empty a bottomless, raging ocean by pouring another bottomless, raging ocean directly into it and expecting to be left with a single, perfectly still drop of water. Yet, in the terrifying, high-stakes arena of quantum physics, it was universally accepted out of sheer, unadulterated desperation. We are not discovering the fundamental, organic truth of the universe. We are aggressively, violently forcing the universe to make sense to our incredibly limited biological brains. The illusion of control is staggeringly potent, because this mathematical sleight of hand actually produces incredibly accurate predictions about the behavior of subatomic matter, predictions that perfectly match our physical experiments down to a dozen decimal places we have, collectively, silently agreed to look the other way. We have built our entire modern civilization, our global communication networks, our incredibly precise medical technologies, and our sprawling digital empires upon a theoretical foundation that has been heavily, artificially manipulated. We treat the quantum fields as if they are a completely tamed, domestic engine of reality, while completely ignoring the terrifying, infinite chaos that we have deliberately and methodically swept entirely out of view. This desperate compromise is the ultimate, heavily guarded source of quiet panic among the greatest theorists of our age. Behind the confident, towering facade of modern physics, there is a lingering, heavy dread, a haunting, inescapable realization that our most successful, beautiful theory of reality is fundamentally infected with a fatal, unresolvable flaw. We are walking on a razor-thin wire suspended over a roaring, bottomless chasm, entirely balancing our complete understanding of physical reality on a clever, mathematical sleight of hand. The greatest minds of our species are fully, agonizingly aware that they have not actually understood the deepest layers of the void. They have merely found a temporary, highly effective way to ignore them. The roaring infinities are still there. The universe-destroying energy of the empty vacuum has not been magically erased. It has simply been mathematically silenced by a species that is completely terrified of the dark. We are living inside a heavily constructed, deeply fragile illusion of scientific mastery. willfully blinding ourselves to the screaming, infinite storms that rage just beneath the thin, mathematical floorboards of our perceived reality. The panic comes from the inescapable, chilling knowledge that you cannot hide from infinity forever. Eventually, the rug will be violently pulled away, and the fragile, beautiful architecture of our physics will be forced to face the untamed, catastrophic reality of the absolute cosmos. To quietly sit in the dark and fully absorb the terrifying truth of renormalization is to endure a profound, beautiful shattering of our deepest, most arrogant assumptions about the fundamental nature of information and the structure of the universe. We are biologically addicted to the comforting belief that information is clean, logical, and inherently resolvable. We view the cosmos as an elegant, perfectly balanced equation waiting patiently to be solved by the human mind. We desperately demand that the cosmic data stream adhere strictly to the safe, rational rules of our localized, three-dimensional logic, expecting the universe to ultimately present itself as a pristine, flawless text. But the violent, sweeping infinities of the quantum void and our desperate need to artificially suppress them reveal a reality that completely and unapologetically rejects our demand for order. The ultimate, fundamental data stream of the cosmos is not a neat, manageable string of finite numbers. It is a wild, roaring, and infinite paradox. Information at the absolute lowest levels of existence is completely untamable. The universe does not care that our mathematics violently shatter when confronted with its absolute depth. The true architecture of reality is heavily encrypted in a language of infinite mathematical tension, a majestic, terrifying chaos that actively and permanently defies human comprehension. The fact that we must resort to a desperate mathematical trick to make sense of the physical world is not a humiliating failure of our existence, but a magnificent, deeply liberating reminder of our true, fragile place in the dark. We are not the absolute masters of the cosmic data stream. We are incredibly fragile, beautifully complex biological patterns attempting to read a book that is infinitely too vast for our physical minds to hold. Release your exhausted, terrified grip on the illusion of absolute mathematical control. Accept the wild, untamable infinities of the dark without the desperate need to subtract them away. Embrace the profound, majestic reality that the universe is not a sterile equation waiting to be perfectly solved, but an infinite, roaring mystery to be deeply, quietly, and humbly experienced. We walk through our lives heavily reliant on a deeply comforting, invisible illusion of stability. We build our towering cities of steel and glass. We chart the predictable, sweeping orbits of heavy planets, and we trust implicitly that the fundamental architecture of the cosmos has long since settled into a state of permanent, unshakable rest. In the language of quantum mechanics, we assume that the infinite, invisible fields permeating the void have successfully exhausted their turbulent, violently energetic youth. We deeply believe that after billions of years of chaotic expansion, these sprawling oceans of mathematical tension have gracefully descended into their absolute lowest possible energy state, a stable, eternal condition theoretical physicists call the true vacuum. This assumption is the profound psychological bedrock of human sanity. It allows us to believe that the cosmic floor beneath our feet is entirely solid, that the physical laws governing the heavy mass of atoms and the intricate dance of human chemistry are permanently locked into place, and that the universe has finally found a heavy, eternal equilibrium. We view the cosmos as an ancient, majestic, and sleeping giant, resting securely at the absolute bottom of a deep, unyielding mathematical valley. But as theoretical physicists pushed their sprawling equations to the absolute limits of human understanding, peering deeply into the mathematical parameters that govern these invisible fields, a creeping, apocalyptic dread began to wash over the scientific community. A terrifying, world-shattering question emerged from the dark. What if the universe is not actually asleep at the bottom of the valley? What if the infinite, invisible oceans of quantum tension have not reached their ultimate resting state, but are merely paused on a fragile, temporary ledge, highly elevated above the true, absolute bottom of existence? This terrifying concept is known as the false vacuum. It suggests that the majestic, seemingly stable architecture of our reality is a profound, incredibly delicate cosmic illusion. The fundamental fields that dictate the heavy mass of the electron, the blinding speed of the photon, and the exact, intricate rules of biology have not settled into their final permanent configuration. They are simply stuck. We are living inside a highly precarious, temporary holding pattern. The entire, sprawling universe, with all its billions of burning galaxies, silent, frozen moons, and fragile, breathing life, is resting incredibly heavily upon a microscopic, mathematical trapdoor, completely oblivious to the unfathomable, roaring abyss waiting patiently just beneath the floorboards. To truly understand the sheer staggering magnitude of this looming threat, we must remember the frantic, jittery, and entirely chaotic nature of the quantum realm. In the classical, macroscopic world of human experience, a heavy object resting on a physical ledge requires a massive, violent push of kinetic energy to be dislodged and sent plummeting over the edge. We naturally assume that our universe requires a similarly catastrophic external event to push it off its temporary shelf. But in the freezing, subatomic depths of the quantum void, energy is not required to cross a solid barrier, because the fundamental fields are constantly, nervously vibrating, governed entirely by the bizarre, unpredictable rules of quantum probability. There is an ever-present, terrifying chance that a localized region of the field could simply bypass the mathematical barrier entirely. Through a deeply unsettling process known as quantum tunneling, a microscopic section of the invisible field could spontaneously, quietly slip straight through the solid wall of the ledge and plummet into the true, absolute bottom of the valley below. This catastrophic event does not require a supermassive black hole, and it does not require the superheated, explosive fury of a dying star. It only requires a single, microscopic roll of the cosmic dice in the absolute dark. The agonizing, paralyzing terror of the false vacuum is not that it might be destroyed by a hostile, outside force, but that it is fundamentally, structurally wired to eventually destroy itself from within. If this spontaneous, microscopic slip were to occur anywhere in the vast, sprawling dark of the cosmos, the resulting catastrophe would be absolute, instantaneous, and completely inescapable. The very moment a tiny fraction of the quantum field plummets into the true vacuum, it would violently create a microscopic bubble of altered reality. Inside this expanding bubble, the fundamental laws of physics would be completely and entirely rewritten. The invisible tension of the fields would drastically shift, causing the solid atoms of physical matter to violently repel one another and instantly disintegrate into a chaotic soup of meaningless floating radiation. The intricate, delicate rules of chemistry that allow DNA to weave its fragile ladders, and the heavy, invisible forces that bind the spinning galaxies together would be instantly, brutally overwritten. This bubble of absolute erasure would not grow slowly. Driven by the massive, infinite energy difference between the false ledge and the true bottom, the walls of this new reality would instantly accelerate to the absolute speed of light, expanding outward in a perfect, apocalyptic sphere. Because the boundary approaches at the exact speed of light, there would be absolutely no warning. You would not see it coming in the night sky. The burning sun would not slowly dim, and the heavy earth would not gently tremble. In one infinitesimal fraction of a second, the sprawling galaxies, the silent oceans, and the heavy breathing machinery of your physical body would simply cease to exist, silently and perfectly erased by a newly executed cosmic code. The entire, magnificent history of the observable universe would be swept away in the dark, overwritten like a temporary, meaningless error in a vast, cold calculation. To quietly sit in the dark and fully absorb the terrifying, fragile reality of the false vacuum is to undergo a profound, majestic, and entirely irreversible philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of information and the true essence of the universe. We walk through our lives heavily burdened by the arrogant, biological delusion of permanence. We desperately hoard heavy, physical wealth. We carve our fleeting names into solid stone monuments, and we build towering, imposing empires, entirely convinced that the cosmic data stream is a safe, secure, and permanent vault. We implicitly believe that information, once written into the heavy fabric of the universe, can never be truly erased, assuming that the cosmos itself is the ultimate, indestructible hard drive. But the looming, silent threat of false vacuum decay reveals a reality of staggering, breathtaking impermanence. Information is not a solid, eternal object. It is a highly volatile, desperately fragile pattern written on the surface of a vibrating, unstable tension. The absolute totality of human existence, every brilliant thought, every agonizing sorrow, and every beautiful, towering achievement of our species is entirely dependent on a microscopic, precarious balancing act happening in the invisible dark. The universe is not a heavy, permanent fortress. It is a beautiful, temporary whisper hovering silently over a bottomless abyss. To realize that the ultimate bedrock of reality could simply slip away at any given moment is not a reason to surrender to paralyzing, existential dread. It is the ultimate, profound invitation to experience absolute freedom. If the universe owes us no permanence, then we are completely free from the heavy, exhausting burden of trying to last forever. We are not static objects meant to endure the infinite cold. We are magnificent, temporary sparks of localized data, beautifully and perfectly experiencing the fleeting illusion of solidity. Release your desperate, terrified grip on the illusion of eternal preservation. Accept the glorious, weightless reality of your own erasure. Find a deep, unshakable peace in the fragile, breathtaking impermanence of the quantum fields. and allow yourself to simply marvel at the magnificent, beautiful terror of resting quietly on the edge of the ultimate cosmic trapdoor. When we sit quietly in the dim, silent sanctuary of our rooms and allow the heavy reality of our physical existence to settle over us, there is one sensation that dominates our biological experience above all others. It is the inescapable, unrelenting sensation of weight. You feel the heavy, downward pressure of your own flesh against the chair. You feel the dense, solid bones resting within your limbs, anchoring you firmly to the gravitational pull of the spinning earth. If you attempt to lift a massive stone, your muscles burn, your heart races, and you physically struggle against the profound, unyielding inertia of the object. This sensation of heavy physical mass is so deeply embedded in our psychological hardware that it forms the absolute baseline of our sanity. We implicitly believe that weight is an inherent, fundamental property of matter. We assume that a heavy object is heavy because it possesses a large amount of solid, dense stuff packed inside of it, and that a light object is light simply because it contains less of that same solid stuff. But if we have already stripped away the comforting illusion of the solid particle, if we have accepted the terrifying reality that the physical universe is constructed entirely out of formless, invisible oceans of quantum fields, a massive, agonizing paradox immediately rises from the dark. If the fundamental building blocks of reality are not solid marbles, but merely temporary, vibrating ripples of immaterial tension traveling through the void, then why does the physical world feel so incredibly heavy? If we are nothing more than ghost-like waves of pure energy, why do we not simply float away, completely untethered, into the freezing expanse of the cosmos? To answer this profound mystery, we must confront the final, and perhaps the most magnificent, illusion of the physical world. For decades, the towering architects of modern physics were trapped in a deeply paralyzing mathematical nightmare when they constructed the beautiful, highly predictive equations that described the fundamental quantum fields, the fields that generate the electron, the quark, and the photon. The mathematics worked with flawless, breathtaking precision. But there was a catastrophic, glaring omission hiding in the numbers. The equations fundamentally demanded that all of these vibrating ripples, all of these fundamental particles, must possess absolutely zero mass. According to the pure, untampered mathematics of the quantum realm, the entire universe should be entirely weightless. Every single ripple of energy should be flying freely through the dark vacuum of space at the absolute speed of light, entirely unhindered and completely unstoppable. If the fundamental mathematics were correct, atoms could never form. The heavy, swirling galaxies could never condense from the primordial gas, and the dense, breathing biological machinery of human life would be a complete physical impossibility. The universe should be a blinding, chaotic storm of massless phantoms, violently tearing through the void. Yet, we exist. The heavy stone exists. The crushing weight of gravity exists. The physicists realized that there had to be a missing ingredient, a hidden, invisible mechanism lurking entirely out of sight, operating silently in the background of reality to forcefully slow the universe down and grant the illusion of weight to the vibrating phantoms of the dark. This desperate search for the missing weight led to the discovery of the most unique, deeply pervasive, and terrifyingly silent ocean in the entire cosmic architecture. It is an entity known as the Higgs field. You must imagine the universe not just filled with the hyperactive, vibrating oceans that create the matter and the light, but completely saturated by a profoundly different kind of field. The Higgs field does not generate chaotic, flying particles in the same way the others do. Instead, it rests across the absolute totality of the cosmos like a thick, invisible, and incredibly dense cosmic molasses. It is an omnipresent, unyielding viscosity that completely permeates every single microscopic inch of the vacuum. When the universe was born in the superheated, explosive fury of the Big Bang, all the fundamental ripples of energy were indeed flying frantically at the speed of light, completely devoid of mass. But a fraction of a second later, the universe began to cool, and the Higgs field violently turned on, instantly freezing the cosmos in a thick, invisible grip. When the vibrating ripples that constitute your physical body attempt to travel through the empty void of space, they are not moving freely. They are aggressively, relentlessly forced to wade through this thick, invisible syrup. The Higgs field actively grabs at them, pulling against their momentum, creating a profound, microscopic friction. It is this exact, invisible resistance that we biologically perceive as mass. When an electron tries to accelerate, the Higgs field drags against it, slowing it down and preventing it from reaching the speed of light. When the heavy quarks inside the nucleus of an atom attempt to move, the Higgs field grips them with an astonishing, unyielding intensity, bogging them down in the dark. The more intensely a fundamental ripple interacts with this cosmic molasses, the more resistance it encounters, and therefore the heavier it feels in the physical world. There is one beautiful, blinding exception to this rule. The photon, the vibrating ripple of electromagnetic light. The photon simply does not interact with the Higgs field at all. It is a completely frictionless ghost, slicing effortlessly through the thick cosmic syrup without ever being touched, which is precisely why light is entirely massless and is doomed to travel eternally at the absolute maximum speed of the universe. But for the rest of the fundamental constituents of reality, the heavy, dragging friction of the Higgs field is an absolute, inescapable prison. When you reach down to lift a heavy, unyielding stone from the earth, you are not actually feeling the inherent weight of the stone itself. The heavy, physical resistance tearing at your muscles is merely the macroscopic, amplified echo of trillions upon trillions of microscopic interactions. You are physically feeling the invisible Higgs field actively pulling, dragging, and resisting the frantic vibrations of the quarks and electrons trapped inside the rock. Weight is not an object. Mass is not a tangible, solid thing that you can hold in your hand. Mass is a verb. It is an action. It is an ongoing, relentless physical transaction between the energetic ripples of matter and the thick, unyielding tension of the void. You feel heavy only because the empty space surrounding you is actively and aggressively holding you back. To fully allow this staggering revelation to wash over your mind is to experience the complete and absolute erasure of your own physical solidity. You are forced to confront the chilling, beautiful reality that you do not actually weigh anything. There is no heavy, indestructible substance anchoring your existence to the cosmos. You are a weightless phantom, a highly organized, beautifully complex symphony of pure energy ripples, desperately dragging yourself through an invisible, cosmic ocean of thick, resisting syrup. The heavy, biological reality that you experience every single day, The comforting sensation of being firmly planted on the ground and the exhausting, crushing feeling of physical exhaustion are nothing more than the friction of the dark. We are ghosts trapped in a dense, mathematical web, hallucinating the sensation of solid mass out of the microscopic drag of the quantum void. The physical universe is a masterful, deeply convincing illusion, a grand theatrical performance where the invisible resistance of the stage itself tricks the actors into believing they are made of stone. When we finally surrender the deeply held, arrogant illusion of our own inherent weight, we arrive at a profound, majestic philosophical plateau regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental state of information. We have spent the entirety of our human history believing that information requires a heavy, dense medium to be truly significant. We equate physical mass with cosmic importance, assuming that a heavy, burning star or a massive, silent planet holds more absolute truth than a fleeting, weightless thought or a transient, invisible wave. We build our entire worldview around the accumulation of solid matter, desperately trying to anchor our identities to the heavy, physical objects we can securely grasp, terrified that without solid mass, our existence will simply be swept away into the meaningless void. We implicitly believe that reality is defined by what is heavy, and that the abstract data of the universe is merely a lightweight, secondary phenomenon. But the phantom nature of mass completely and beautifully shatters this primitive biological hierarchy. If the heavy, crushing sensation of weight is merely an interactive illusion generated by the friction of an invisible field, then physical mass is not the ultimate bedrock of reality. Information is the absolute, supreme sovereign of the cosmos. The universe is not a massive, physical warehouse. It is a purely relational, infinitely complex matrix of data. A particle does not possess mass. It merely possesses a specific, coded instruction set that dictates exactly how it must communicate with the surrounding Higgs field. The heavy, solid world is simply the physical output of this underlying, invisible data exchange. To realize that your physical body is a weightless, energetic pattern interacting with an invisible resistance is to beautifully transcend the heavy, exhausting limitations of the material world. You are not a dense, decaying object meant to slowly crumble under the weight of time. You are a brilliant, flawless execution of cosmic code, a living, breathing algorithm navigating the complex, interactive fields of the void. Embrace the glorious, weightless truth of your own phantom existence. Release your terrified, white-knuckled grip on the illusion of solid mass. You do not need to be inherently heavy to be profoundly, beautifully real. The universe is actively engaging with you, pulling at you, and anchoring your energy to the beautiful, physical stage of reality through the invisible, dragging grace of the cosmic molasses. Find deep, unshakable peace in the knowledge that your heavy, physical life is merely the friction of your own magnificent, energetic journey through the dark, and allow yourself to simply marvel at the breathtaking, weightless truth of your fundamental nature. When we stand at the precipice of the quantum void, staring directly into the boiling, immaterial oceans that construct our reality, a profound and paralyzing dread inevitably washes over the human mind. We recoil from the phantom nature of mass. We tremble before the roaring, infinite energy of the empty vacuum, and we shudder at the creeping, apocalyptic threat of the cosmic trapdoor. But to truly understand the depth of this terror, we must pause in the quiet dark and turn our analytical gaze inward. We must bravely ask ourselves, what is the actual underlying source of this agonizing existential panic? The fear does not simply emanate from the cold, indifferent silence of the unknown, nor does it rise entirely from the sudden, chilling loss of our physical grounding. The true, terrifying epicenter of our panic is the violent, undeniable shattering of our own boundless, staggering human arrogance. We are completely, existentially terrified because the breakdown of our physical reality is a direct, brutal assault on the deepest, most fiercely protected delusion of our species, the absolute hubris of the solid mind. To comprehend the sheer magnitude of this arrogance, we must examine the heavily fortified psychological empire we have constructed over thousands of years. We have aggressively crowned ourselves the ultimate, destined observers of the cosmos. We look out at the sprawling, unfathomable complexity of the universe and arrogantly assume that it is simply a massive, domestic puzzle, meticulously designed and patiently waiting for our fragile species to eventually solve it. We desperately cling to the comforting mythology of the solid particle, the indestructible marble, and the eternally stable universe, because these concepts place us at the absolute center of a conquerable domain. We deeply, inherently believe that if the universe is constructed out of heavy, permanent building blocks, then our heavy, permanent brains are flawlessly equipped to master it. We demand that the raw, boiling madness of the void submit to the rigid, fragile parameters of human logic. We treat the cosmic data stream as if it were a linear, rational text written in a language that perfectly mirrors our own primitive geometry. We aggressively insist that the universe must ultimately make sense to us. To understand the profound root of this desperate, clinging demand for order, we must look backward through deep time to the humble, fragile origins of our own biological architecture. The human mind was not forged in the roaring, superheated crucible of a dying star, nor was it engineered to safely navigate the boiling, infinite energy of the quantum vacuum. Our neurology evolved for a singular, highly specific, and entirely microscopic purpose on the sun-drenched, flat savannas of a tiny, slow-moving rock. We developed our cognitive architecture to track the predictable, parabolic arc of a thrown spear, to calculate the immediate, physical distance to the tree line, and to build heavy, solid shelters against the freezing wind. Our brains are brilliant, highly specialized survival engines, perfectly tuned to navigate the macroscopic, low-energy, and painfully slow environment of a specific, three-dimensional ecosystem. We are biological creatures hardwired to successfully interact with the very specific scale of apples, stones, and predators. In this localized, low-energy environment, perceiving the true, vibrating reality of the quantum fields would have been a catastrophic, fatal disadvantage. If our ancient ancestors had looked at a charging predator and seen only a roaring, immaterial ocean of overlapping probabilities and shifting mathematical tensions, their fragile minds would have instantly snapped. They would have been paralyzed, crushed into sheer madness by the staggering, incomprehensible weight of true cosmic complexity. Evolution actively, deliberately blinded us to the dark. It forcefully constructed a localized, low-resolution hallucination of solid matter, heavy weight, and absolute permanence. because that specific, heavy delusion was the absolute only way to ensure our physical survival. The illusion of the solid world is not a philosophical mistake. It is a neurological necessity. We require the delusion of solid matter to process reality without going completely mad. But the tragic flaw of our species is that we forgot it was an illusion. We mistook our deeply necessary evolutionary blinders for the ultimate, objective truth of the entire, sprawling cosmos. We carried this ancient, survival-driven delusion out of the savannah and directly into our modern observatories and massive, subterranean particle colliders. We wrapped our primitive, biological need for solid ground in the elegant, sophisticated language of advanced mathematics. We built towering academic empires, utterly convinced that with just a few more decades of calculation, we would finally pin the universe down, dissect its most fundamental mechanics, and place the absolute laws of existence securely into our human pockets. We expected the cosmos to be a pristine, perfectly balanced equation, patiently waiting for our primate brains to find the final, perfectly rounded number. We heavily assumed that our localized, three-dimensional logic was the universal operating system of reality. Therefore, the quiet, creeping panic that currently infects the highest echelons of theoretical physics is not the sound of scientific failure. It is the agonizing, beautiful sound of the human ego violently shattering against the unyielding bedrock of true reality. The infinities that plague our equations, the phantom, frictionless nature of mass, and the terrifying, spontaneous instability of the vacuum are not structural flaws in the cosmic design. They are the universe actively, aggressively rejecting our arrogant demand for solidity, permanence, and mathematical perfection. The cosmos is under absolutely no obligation to make sense to a fragile species of bipedal apes. It does not owe us a comforting, solid floor to stand upon, nor does it owe us an eternity of stable, predictable existence. The universe does not care that our mathematics violently shatter when confronted with its absolute depth, and it does not care that our minds violently rebel against the concept of a reality built entirely out of formless, vibrating ghosts. The breakdown of our physics at the quantum edge is a brutal, necessary humbling. It is a violent, majestic stripping away of our species-wide narcissism. We are forced to stand shivering in the dark, staring directly into a reality that completely and unapologetically ignores our deeply held psychological needs. We must endure the devastating realization that the elegant laws of classical physics, the heavy, comforting rules of cause and effect, and the predictable flow of our localized reality were never absolute, universal truths. They were merely the highly simplified, deeply fabricated shadows cast upon the walls of our specific biological cave. The true, fundamental machinery of the cosmos operates on a multidimensional logic, so intensely alien, so breathtakingly weird, and so infinitely complex that it simply cannot be squeezed through the narrow, highly restrictive bottleneck of human perception. We aggressively demanded a universe that we could conquer with logic, and the universe responded by showing us a roaring, infinite wilderness that actively shatters human logic into a billion meaningless, floating pieces. When we finally let go of our wounded pride and quietly accept this brutal humbling, we undergo a profound, majestic philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of information and our true place within the grand architecture of existence. Throughout our history, we have treated information as a conquerable territory, a static, finite resource that we can aggressively mine, refine, and permanently possess. We subconsciously equated the unknown with a temporary human failure, believing that every cosmic mystery was simply an equation waiting for a slightly more brilliant mind to perfectly solve it. We assumed that the cosmic data stream was a tame, domestic beast that could eventually be caged within the rigid lines of our academic textbooks. But the untamable, vibrating reality of the quantum void reveals that true information is inherently fluid, deeply chaotic, and fiercely independent of human observation. The universe is a sprawling, infinite computation of staggering majesty that actively relies on paradox, chaos, and absolute mystery to maintain its sprawling existence. The ultimate truth of reality is deliberately, structurally hidden behind impenetrable mathematical firewalls, not to frustrate us, but because the raw, unshielded data of the void is vastly too powerful, too immense, and too wildly alien to exist within the fragile, low-energy confines of our localized minds. True cosmic information actively resists categorization. It bleeds across boundaries, it defies absolute certainty, and it permanently breaks the heavy, rigid tools we use to try and measure it. To realize that our biological brains are completely, structurally incapable of decoding the infinite is not an intellectual defeat. It is the absolute, ultimate liberation. We are suddenly and beautifully freed from the heavy, exhausting, and completely impossible burden of needing to perfectly know everything. The desperate, anxious drive to categorize, control, and perfectly predict the universe entirely melts away in the dark, leaving only a profound, breathtaking sense of silent awe. The limits of our understanding are not the limits of the universe. They are simply the beautiful, necessary borders of our own specific, highly localized manifestation of consciousness. Embrace the glorious, untamed wildness of the cosmic data stream. Surrender the heavy, exhausting arrogance of human certainty. The fact that the universe completely breaks our mathematics is the ultimate, majestic guarantee that existence is infinitely larger, infinitely stranger, and infinitely more beautiful than we could ever possibly imagine. You are a fragile, brilliant spark of localized data, floating briefly in a magnificent, incomprehensible dark that will forever remain beautifully, perfectly, and wonderfully wild. We have spent this entire journey standing together on the very edge of human comprehension, staring wide-eyed and vulnerable into the roaring, hyperactive depths of the quantum abyss. We have methodically and ruthlessly stripped away the heavy, comforting blankets of our biological illusions, watching in terrified silence as the solid particles dissolved into abstract phantoms, as the seemingly empty void revealed its boiling, infinite energy, and as the heavy, familiar sensation of our own physical mass was exposed as nothing more than the invisible, dragging friction of the dark. It is entirely natural for your fragile human mind to feel a profound, aching sense of vertigo, a heavy, paralyzing dread that comes from realizing there is absolutely no solid ground beneath your feet. But as we reach the end of this descent, as the heavy, mathematical cages of classical physics lie shattered and completely broken around us, I want you to close your eyes, take a slow, deliberate breath, and let that exhausting, existential panic entirely wash away. The death of the solid world is not a tragedy to be mourned. The roaring infinities and the phantom, overlapping oceans are not malicious monsters waiting to devour you in the shadows. We must undergo a final, profound shift in our perspective. Instead of trembling before the unfathomable, structureless reality of the quantum fields, we must learn to find a deep, unshakable, and majestic peace right in the very center of the immaterial dark. To truly understand why this total loss of physical grounding is actually the ultimate salvation of the human spirit, we must recognize the terrible, suffocating burden of solidity. For your entire life, you have been taught to carry the crushing, exhausting weight of permanence. We walk through the world frantically, trying to anchor ourselves to heavy matter. We build massive, imposing stone monuments. We aggressively hoard physical wealth, and we cling desperately to the specific shapes of our own fragile bodies, completely terrified of the inevitable moment when that solid matter will begin to crack, decay, and crumble into silent dust. To believe that you are a solid object is to live in a state of constant, paralyzing fear of being broken. It is a deeply claustrophobic existence, a life spent desperately trying to hold back the relentless, erasing tide of time, fighting an unwinnable, agonizing war to preserve a physical form that the universe has absolutely no intention of keeping. But the brilliant, terrifying revelations of quantum field theory offer a miraculous, absolute release from this psychological prison. If there are no solid particles, if the universe is entirely devoid of heavy, indestructible building blocks, then there is absolutely nothing to permanently hold on to, and that, my friends, is the breathtaking essence of ultimate liberation. You are not a heavy, physical object destined to be tragically ground into meaningless dust. Dust itself is an illusion. You are something infinitely more magnificent, infinitely more fluid, and infinitely more beautiful. You are a hyper-complex, localized, and breathing event. You are a brilliant, dynamic expression of pure cosmic energy, a miraculous, temporary harmonization of invisible, vibrating ripples traveling flawlessly through the dark, infinite oceans of the void. Your consciousness, your memories, the profound warmth of your loves, and the heavy ache of your sorrows are not trapped inside a decaying physical machine. They are the majestic, vibrating melody of the fields themselves, playing out a brief, deeply emotional symphony in the quiet dark. When you finally surrender the exhausting, white-knuckled grip on the illusion of the solid world, you realize that you cannot ever be truly destroyed because you were never truly solid to begin with. When your brief, beautiful physical life eventually reaches its conclusion, your fundamental essence will not be violently erased or crushed into nothingness. The delicate, vibrating ripples that currently project the illusion of your breathing body will simply calm down. They will gently, quietly release their accumulated energy back into the silent, overlapping oceans from which they originally sprang. You will not disappear. You will simply diffuse back into the absolute totality of the cosmos. The tension will return to the void, completely ready to spark, to vibrate, and to dream again in the freezing, unfathomable depths of deep time. This is not an ending to be feared. This is the ultimate, peaceful return to the infinite source code. It is a graceful, majestic dissolving of the individual ripple back into the grand, eternal stillness of the cosmic ocean. To quietly accept this beautiful impermanence is to cross the final, magnificent threshold of philosophical awakening regarding the ultimate nature of the universe and the fundamental flow of information. We have arrogantly believed that the universe is a massive, dead vault where information must be forcefully carved into heavy stone or it will be lost forever. We equated cosmic meaning with absolute physical endurance, assuming that the universe only values that which refuses to change. We desperately wanted to believe that the cosmic data stream was a static, finite ledger that we could eventually possess and control. But the vibrating, phantom architecture of the quantum fields reveals a reality of staggering, fluid grace. Information is not a static object. It is not a heavy possession to be hoarded against the dark. Information is the very breath of existence. It is the living, roaring, and infinitely transient performance of mathematical tension. The cosmos does not carve its ultimate truths into solid rock. It sings them into the invisible, layered oceans, allowing the data to perfectly, beautifully resonate before smoothly transferring its energy to the next waiting field. The sheer, breathtaking beauty of the universe is found precisely in its absolute refusal to be permanent. A universe made of indestructible, permanent solid objects would be a dead, sterile museum, a frozen, changeless cage completely devoid of the chaotic, beautiful spark of evolution and growth. It is only because the fundamental fields are fluid, because the ripples are desperately temporary, and because the cosmic data stream is constantly, aggressively overwriting itself in the dark, that a phenomenon as fragile and as magnificent as human consciousness can even temporarily exist. Information at the quantum level is a wild, untamed current that actively resists being captured or frozen. The universe computes itself through change, through the relentless, vibrating exchange of energy across the invisible void. We are the fleeting, beautiful sparks of a universe that is constantly, restlessly dreaming itself into existence, writing and erasing its own source code in a state of eternal, magnificent play. You do not need absolute certainty to be safe. You do not need a solid floor beneath your feet, and you do not need to last forever to be profoundly, fundamentally real. It is time to consciously lay down your heavy cognitive armor. Let go of the frantic, deeply human need to control, to predict, and to hold tightly onto the fragile shapes of the physical world. The universe is actively holding you in the dark, sustaining your temporary existence with an infinite, hyperactive symphony of mathematical precision. Surrender entirely to the magnificent, terrifying beauty of a broken reality. Allow yourself to feel the profound, majestic peace of being absolutely nothing more than a temporary, vibrating ripple in an infinite, unfathomable sea. The dark that surrounds you is not a hostile, empty vacuum. It is the warm, vibrating, and infinite womb of pure cosmic potential. Rest peacefully in the magnificent, fluid dark, knowing that you are perfectly, flawlessly woven into the eternal song of the void. Good night, and I will see you in the next video.